So my friend Gavin said to me, hey Martin, I've got an Olympus E-P1. It's this really old micro four thirds camera and I've got a couple of lenses. I'm going to lend it to you. I was like, okay, what's good about it? And he said, it's the rendering of these files. And when he said that, I know he knows what he's talking about, and I knew that it was going to be a good camera. I've never used a micro four thirds camera before, but I've always seen their users be really passionate about them. So I was really intrigued to try this out. And then eventually I had a moment where I could get into London and do a little bit of street photography with it. But I need to make a little bit of a disclaimer first, because I didn't have enough chance to prepare with this camera to get to know it. So I stuck it into manual mode, lowest aperture it would go to, shutter speed kind of around 50th to 80th of a second, somewhere around there, and then auto ISO. And then I set the exposure compensation to underexpose 1 stop, because usually in darkened conditions you need to underexpose with the exposure compensation, because most cameras will try to overexpose the image to compensate for all the dark areas. So anyway, I guessed with that, and I really didn't know the controls, so I was completely unfamiliar with the camera, didn't have time to get to know it as such. So okay, after I took this first picture, I'm looking at this, and as I'm walking down the street, in my head I'm thinking to myself, that on the back of the camera, even though it's a low resolution screen, that looks like something. That really does. The tones of it, I know it's going to be grainy, I can just tell that already, but I don't care about stuff like that. It's just all of the tonal transitions and the way it looks. I thought, if that looks like that on the screen, I'm going to be really happy with this. In my mind, I'm already feeling something that was on the first picture I took. So I carried on down the street a bit further, and I thought, it's going to be interesting. This building is called the Can of Ham, because it resembles, I guess, a tin of ham, right? And as I was going past it, I was looking inside, and I thought, this is so well designed inside. It looks like those old 1950s colour movies, you know, like something like North by Northwest, Alfred Hitchcock movie. It reminded me of that, and just the design of the inside, everything looked so well done. When I got round to the side of the building here, when you take pictures like this, you really need to get the camera as close to the glass as possible to cut down reflections. And when I looked through, I could see what the designer of this was trying to achieve, because there's just this perfect harmony and balance between all of the shapes and the objects in there. And I thought, this has been very well and cleverly thought out, but I could see a composition. Never seen anyone take this shot before. And I know this isn't kind of like a regular sort of thing, but it just looked like a film set to me. It just looked like a film set. So I thought, I'm going to take this picture. When I took this picture, I could have just stopped the shoot at this point, because I was so happy with this picture. For me, it might not appeal to you, but to me, this picture speaks volumes. It's exactly the sort of picture like this that I like, because I like those old 1950s colour films. Colour, yeah, not black and white, colour. And I really find that they're beautiful in the way that they're filmed. And this camera was giving me this straight out of camera. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. Just the rendering, I could see it on the back of the camera. And I really wanted to, to just go home and look at the picture and then be able to come back again. But I knew that I had to carry on. I've got another interior shot here. Couldn't believe that this had come out of this tiny little camera that almost looks like a point and shoot. But at the same time, I wasn't surprised, because my friend Gavin had told me this was going to happen, and I do trust his opinion on that, and I knew I was going to be in for it. I just didn't think it was going to be quite that good. And that wasn't because of the sensor size, don't get me wrong. That had nothing to do with the sensor size. It's just that so few cameras are actually able to do that kind of rendering. That's why I'm always surprised when I see something like that, is because it's just rare. Okay, so let me get into my conclusions from this. I've told you how wonderful I think this is, the sensor, that it can do a really good job. But what do I think that this lends itself to? Well, I think the Micro Four Thirds in particular lends itself really well to doing this kind of architectural work. I think it's very, very good for that. I kind of like all the grain that it has. It just looks really great, and in a way I think that maybe that added to it. I really love this lens. Wow, this is so nice to use something like this. I think this would be very good at doing landscape photography as well, because why not? Sensors like this, these Micro Four Thirds sensors, one advantage they have is that it's very easy to get everything in focus. And when you're shooting landscapes and architecture, that's one of the things that's harder to do. So you're often having to get down to like f8, f11, and then you might even need to focus stack. Well, I think that that would all be out of the window with this. And my friend Peter is hand holding like 3-second, 4-second exposures on his camera because the sensor stabilization is so good on it. Now that's a more advanced model, but it tells you something. You could do away with your tripod, have everything in focus. You can do away with focus stacking. I'm talking myself into it. I really am, especially for landscapes. I think it would be the system of choice for me for landscapes. It would be Micro Four Thirds. I think it's really got the edge for that. There's a 45 1.8 and it's a really good lens for portraits as well. I could see myself put a little system of this together and really enjoy using it. Would I get one of these EP1s? Yeah, I probably would because of that rendering. But people are telling me that rendering's kind of there across the board with Micro Four Thirds. If you think that's true, or if you don't think that's true, if you own a Micro Four Thirds camera like an Olympus, that would be a really interesting comment for me to read in the description. Like if you're looking at what I'm doing and you're saying, yeah, that's kind of standard for this type of sensor, let me know. Also, let me know if it isn't, if it just stops at a certain point, because with a lot of manufacturers, they make cameras to a point and then that stops. They think, oh, okay, well, we'll ditch all of the amazing looking rendering and we'll just go after super clean clinical sharpness now because that's easier to measure, right? So often manufacturers stop producing this kind of a sensor and then they produce something which is just completely, you know, like ordinary. Let's just say ordinary, good, but like ordinary looking. So I didn't have enough time with this camera. I mean, I wouldn't want to use it on a wedding or anything like that. I'm not saying you couldn't do it. It's just that with the time that I've had with it, I would say it's not going to be like a great camera for doing something like that. There would be obviously better choices. But if you were to be someone who was doing a lot of kind of street photography, architecture photography, landscape photography with the occasional portrait, I'd probably grab something like this and then get one of those 45mm 1.8s or whatever, something, they have portrait lenses. I'm very interested to see what the rendering would look like on a portrait. Very interested indeed, because I think it could be really good. It might be. I'm certainly not in a position where I'm thinking, oh my God, I didn't know Micro Four Thirds with a small sensor could take photographs that look good. I'm no way in that category because I'm not bothered about sensor sizes. For me, sensor size is all about what does it bring. So every system has its advantages and disadvantages, and sometimes it's worth owning 2 or 3 different systems depending on what you do because it can make your life easier. I could very much imagine running around doing landscapes with a wide angle zoom and a slightly longer lens, nice and lightweight setup, really good stabilization, no tripod. That's the dream. For me, the dream is not needing a tripod. That's the absolute dream because I don't like them. If you want to help keep the channel going, you can buy me a coffee in the link in the description. Please subscribe if you're new here. Give me a like if you enjoyed the video. Consider leaving me a comment as well. And I will see you again in the next video. Take care. Bye bye.